Hello and welcome to Cereal at Midnight. I am Heath, and this is an unscripted conversation about, I guess, the darkness of DC comic book movies, because it's not Marvel, and it's not some of the independent comic book movies. It's really just DC. But I thought, just kind of get this out in a video, just kind of get my thoughts out. It's been a while since we've had one of these opinion pieces, too. These unscripteds really allow me the opportunity to just kind of tell you what I'm thinking and figure it out as I record. We got a new trailer for the Robert Pattinson Batman, The Batman. And it's like Saw. It's like a horror movie. And on one hand, I'm like, well, all right, I'm going to go see it for sure. But then I'm like, this is so far from any version of Batman that I care about or am interested in. And why? Why are we doing this? Why has it... And of course, why is because Joker was this huge thing. Joker was this... Joker is a meta commentary on the superhero movie. But I never saw it for Batman, I never wanted it for Batman. And we got it in Superman too. I remember talking with friends around 2008. Christopher Nolan's Batman is sort of the Batman that's inspired those stories, those movies, very much take place. They're a reaction of society during the War on Terror. Right? Movies are always a reflection of who we are as a society, what we want, what our dreams are, what our escapism should be. You want to find out who we are as a people? Look at our entertainment. So Nolan's Batman, Batman Begins kind of stands on its own. That's my favorite of the three, by the way, because it's the most comic booky. But then he decides to ground Batman in this real world, It's like the streets, the crime, the infrastructure. It's so realistic to the point that there's no room for jokes. There's no room for these larger-than-life villains. Heath Ledger's Joker has to be so dark that it becomes this, this symbol of anarchy. And I remember saying with friends at the time, like, well, it can't get any darker than Nolan. Thankfully, the next Batman will be a step back. And then we get Ben Affleck asking Superman, do you bleed? And we got Superman movies where Jimmy Olsen gets shot execution style in the back of the head in the first 10 minutes of the movie. Or maybe it was 15 in Act 1. And I'm just like, what are we doing? Why are we so dark? Why do we execute Jimmy Olsen? At some point, it just becomes parody, really. It becomes this sense of comedy. Then, it was during that time I made a video in the early days of Cereal at Midnight where I was like, has Batman become too dark? For me, I'm playing the Arkham games at the time. There was a huge story in the comics where Scott Snyder had been writing Batman and he has Joker. Joker cuts his face off and then reattaches it with ropes and wires and things. And then there's the climax of that arc is does he cut off the faces of Robin and Damian, Bruce Wayne's son? Spoilers if you haven't read the comics, but that's 10 years ago. Of Nightwing, did they remove their faces? It's so dark. It's so okay. How much darker can it go? I'm watching this trailer for the Batman, and I'm like, how much darker can these characters get before there's just nothing left of them? They have been deconstructed and deconstructed. It all goes back to Frank Miller, The Dark Knight Returns. What is that? 1986, I think. Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns deconstructs Batman. It presents a very human, very flawed, very driven Batman. That's deconstruction. Batman Year One, deconstruction. What Alan Moore did with Watchmen, he's deconstructing those characters. He wanted to do that originally, the Watchmen characters. He wanted to do that with DC characters, and DC was like, no way, pal. Because of course, you tear characters apart, you have a hard time putting them back together again. And I wonder if that's where we are 35 years later after The Dark Knight Returns, where we have deconstructed these heroes so much to make them so dirty, so corrupted. So, in the trailer for the Batman, he's clearly angry, furious, he's cynical, he's just full of rage. Because of course, as a society, we're full of rage. I get it. But Marvel takes another tactic and they present the heroes in Technicolor, full scope. Captain America is uncompromising. We got a Superman movie. This is a contrast to Marvel. I guess DC has decided to be the yin or the yang to Marvel's yin, however that would work. The dark to the light, right? They're like, well, we'll go in the other direction. We'll be super dark, very gritty, very nihilistic. And then we've got, in Man of Steel, Superman's like, or Clark is like, what am I supposed to do? Let all these people die? And his dad, Jonathan Kent, one of the most important figures, the Uncle Ben of the Superman universe, is like, I don't know, maybe. Like, that's not what a weird, cynical, nihilistic take on that. And then he never really gets a chance to instruct otherwise because, spoilers for Man of Steel, that character is removed from the story. We're so far from the origins of these characters. These characters have been around for 80 plus years. I watched the Batman. I'm like, well, okay, the detective angle looks really cool. For a horror environment, for Saw, that works for Saw. It really is. I feel like the conception of these movies is they're like, let's take Batman and drop him into a Saw universe. Because it's crimes, right? It's like, they even say, like, let's play a game. Like, they all but have a little guy on a tricycle. So, I don't know. It's just so far from where these characters originated 80 plus years ago. And you go back to, we're talking about post-Depression. We're talking about World War I. We're talking about World War II. These characters are rooted in darkness. But they weren't defined by that darkness. And they overcame. And I just wonder, how much darker do these movies have to get before we can start to turn a corner and have some optimism in our DC universe again? The shows are 180 degrees in the opposite direction. Flash, Arrow is dark, but no other show was as dark as Arrow, and even Arrow's goofy. Like, count the times in a season that his sister's like, I wish that it had been you on the island, or I wish that Dad was here and you were still on the island. Like, it's nonstop. But every show after that seemed to get lighter and lighter. Flash and Supergirl, and now we've got Superman and Lois, which is just like, oh my gosh, Smallville was never that dark. These characters on television are so much closer to their comic book counterparts. But DC, Warner Brothers with their movies is just like, let's see how dark we can go. Let's just really bash all the life and the love out of this. And it does. I want to say, if this is not a judgment on these things, this is me expressing an opinion and really just kind of trying to figure out how I feel about it. It's not an attack. Definitely not an attack. We can have a conversation about it. But I wonder, what's the consequence of this? Joker, right? Satire on comic book movies, satire on society, meta commentary. I do think it's satire, but I'm going to use meta. It's a meta commentary on where we are as a society, the anger, the distrust in our leaders. Going back to where, it's very much a throwback to the 70s, to Taxi Driver, to Mean Streets, Martin Scorsese. Scorsese was supposed to direct Joker, but he decided to step out of that. And so with Scorsese directing that, it's this interesting commentary on his past work. You take Scorsese out of it, then it becomes something else. It becomes this homage, again, a commentary on Scorsese in the 70s. That's America. That's society looking for, who are our leaders when we can't trust anybody? It's Vietnam has come and gone. Nixon, Watergate. Who do we trust? Hubba, 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 who do we trust? So out of that, right, let's go back to the 70s. Let's do that. So what happens? We get super dark. You got about 6 years of just like really intense moping and sadness and anger and distrust. Serpico, Taxi Driver is the best example of that. Then what happens? Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Star Wars, Alien. And before you know it, we have the blockbuster. 80s arrive. We're having a good time. We're just enjoying the spectacle of everything. And that doesn't mean there's no deeper movies in those things, in those eras. But we didn't live there. We didn't stay there. But we've been here in this place for at least 15 years. And we're not getting out of it. We're going deeper into it. Warner Brothers is doubling down on it. And I just wonder, where's it gonna go? How's it gonna end? Kids aren't gonna go see The Batman, probably. I've got a daughter who loves Marvel and is not interested in DC. And it's very clear why, because they're not making movies for the wide general audience. When did we all come to Batman? When did we come to Superman? Chances are we were children. Those are characters that were saturated into our culture. Superpowers, the Super Friends on Saturday mornings, and maybe Batman the Animated Series if you're a 90s kid. These characters were a big part of our childhoods, and then we got, the Michael Keaton Batman movie, which was, very gritty for its time. But you look back on it now, it's camp. I don't know how these movies that are being made now are going to age. I want to say poorly, because we as fans want the stuff that we loved as kids to age with us. We want Batman to grow up with us. We want Superman to grow up with us. He-Man. We saw it a lot recently with that He-Man cartoon on Netflix. We want these things to grow up with us and to be mature and dark and gritty. But of course, by doing that, they lose the thing that we loved about them when we were children. And we're putting a barrier between us and the next generation. And that's unfortunate. And I've seen it happen in my own house. Because my child, my daughter, is not interested in DC heroes. At least not in the cinematic sense, at least not in the movie sense. There is no current, Batman show or Superman show that I'm aware of. There are things that come and go. There was this Justice League Light kind of show a few years back that was pretty fun. But there's no Batman the animated series right now. There's no Superman the animated series. We have the CW shows, and I think the CW shows have probably done the best job of making these characters accessible, showcasing the legacy, how they have been around for 80-something years. Flash, all these characters are legacies. There have been at least 3. I think we're on our 4th legacy with some of these characters. You go to Green Lantern, right? You got Alan Scott, you've got Hal Jordan, you've got Kyle Rayner. Now they've passed the torch to a 4th generation of Green Lantern, but they carry through all the way back. Same with Flash, same with so many of these other characters. And so, I don't know, I like that. I respect that. I admire that. My loyalty is to comics. And Batman never succumbed to these darknesses. He always overcame. And there was always some optimism that came out of that. He was doubling down on his identity as a hero. Superman, right? Superman never gave in to the darkness of the world around him. He was always the light. He has all the power in the world. If you guys here's what I would say if you want to know more about these characters outside of the movies. Go read Superman for all seasons. Read John Byrne's Man of Steel. It was a miniseries, I think a 6-issue miniseries, maybe it was a 4-issue miniseries, but he wrote it for a couple of years after that. Just oversaw Superman for a lot of comics. There are, I think, 9 trade paperbacks of John Byrne's Man of Steel. Go read anything from Batman from the 70s, from the 80s, even through the 90s. It's so much different than it is now. This has become this very cynical, very anti-hero element that overtakes these characters. And again, here's the end point. I don't think there is an answer to this. I'm realizing, like, this is the end of the conversation. Where does it stop? I don't know. I guess we're going to find out. Guys, thank you so much. I appreciate you hanging out for this conversation. What do you think? Where's it going to go? How does it end? What's the next step? Do we get? It has to, at some point, you can't go any darker, right? You have to begin to deconstruct. They're broken. At some point, you have to put them back together and rebuild them for another generation. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below, guys. Thank you so much. Take care. Until next time, here's where to go and what to do.